Larry, thank you for joining. Everyone is looking forward to getting to hear from you. And I thought that we should start with the obvious question. What's harder, running an NBA team where you have multi-millions of rabid fans depending on you, or running a multi-billion-dollar brand where, to exaggerate the point, there's only one person that you're really responsible to, but that's Michael Jordan.
I think running the Trailblazers was a little bit more challenging. The main reason being you have no control over injuries. And to me, that's a huge part of the game. When I went to the Trailblazers, we had Brandon Roy, who to me was one of the best players to ever put on a pair of sneakers. We had LaMarcus Aldridge, who was a future Hall of Famer. And we drafted Greg Oden, who to me, that was the piece that was going to take us over the top. And Greg was injured from the very beginning. Over a 5-year period, he played 82 games. So he played one season over a 5-year period. And so again, to me, we thought we had the right plan, and we were ready to contend for a championship, and injuries. So to me, that was more challenging because there's nothing you can do about that.
Can't control Greg Oden's foot. Maybe you needed an Air Jordan on his foot.
That might have helped. That might have helped.
So let's talk about your extraordinary business career. I mean, you've been an executive of a swimwear company, at Kraft Foods, at Campbell Soup, Portland Trailblazers, Nike. What's the through line?
So I think to me, when I was about to graduate from Temple University, they set it up where all these companies come on campus and you interview with different companies. And I started out, early on I took interviews with companies that I knew I didn't want to work for whatever reason, but I needed to practice, because to me, whether it's sports or anything you're doing, practice leads to confidence, and confidence leads to success. And so I took these interviews, and the question was always, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? And that was, I thought a lot about that question. And to me, I decided I wanted to be in a decision-making role. I wanted to be in a position where I was helping to make decisions that determine direction the company was going to go in. And so that was my kind of motivation to really be a decision maker, and to be willing to take responsibility for the decisions. If they were good decisions and they turned out good, then fine. And if they turned out not to be the right decision, to be willing to take the responsibility for that, learn from it, and move on. And so that's kind of been my approach through all of my jobs and all my career.
So growing a Jordan brand with others, but you get the responsibility and you get some of the credit. Growing it from $150 million to a $4 billion brand.
Actually, it's going to be about $7.5 billion this year. A little bit more.
Yeah. And I remember when that difference, $3.5 billion. I remember when that was a lot of money. Today,
it still kind of is.
It's still a lot of money. You worked with Paul Allen. You worked with Phil Knight. You've worked with Michael Jordan. Who'd you learn the most from?
It's interesting. I've learned a lot from all of those folks, and I think I've been working with Michael and Phil a lot longer, and so I've been exposed to them a lot more, and have, I think, learned a lot more from them just because I've been exposed to them and been around them a lot more. I learned a lot from Paul Allen as well. And to me, running an NBA team was like, I couldn't have imagined myself being in a situation where I would be running an NBA team. And the cool part about it is Paul never went to any of the owners' meetings. If the league had issues or questions, they would call me. If other teams had questions, David Stern actually treated me, we'd be in meetings and he'd say, everybody but the owners leave, and he'd look at me and say, stay. Because he treated me like I was the owner, because I represented the team. And that was an amazing learning experience. I mean, being around people like David Stern and Mark Cuban and Dr. Buss, I mean, these guys, just being in the same environment with them and listening and seeing how they led and how they, managed their teams and the way they conducted their business. To me, it was just incredible learning. So all throughout my career, I've been fortunate enough to be exposed to some pretty amazing people that I've had an opportunity to learn from. And again, I think the three you named are right up there at the top of the list of people that I've learned from.
Yeah, it obviously has been an incredible career. Larry, what happened on September 30th, 1965?
So, and I'm going to position it this way, but from about the age of 12, 13 years old up until the age of 30, I was in and out of jail. I was a gang member. I was a street thug. And on that night, I actually, myself and some others, I was drinking wine and angry, and I shot another young man and killed him. And I was charged as an adult at 16 years old. I pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Was sentenced to 4.5 to 20 years. Did the 4.5, got out, and was caught up in the cycle of recidivism, the revolving door that most people that are a part of the criminal justice system kind of get caught up in. And so for many years, I was in and out of jail. I lived the life of a criminal. And the last time I was incarcerated, I was arrested for 5 armed robbery charges. Fortunately, I was blessed, and I was sentenced to 4 to 10 years. And the prison that I was at that time in Pennsylvania, they had a program there where you could take college classes inside the jail and then transfer to these trailers. There were a number of schools that were teaching classes in the jail in the Philadelphia area: Villanova, Cheney, Temple, Montgomery County Community College, Philadelphia. We're all teaching classes inside the jail. And then you could, at a certain point, you could qualify to move into trailers that were actually outside the jail wall, live in those trailers, and leave every day and go to school and just have to be back by 8 o'clock at night. And so eventually I got into that program, got my associate's degree while I was in that program, going back and forth, and then ended up moving to a halfway house in North Philadelphia. Started at Temple University as a junior, got my bachelor's degree in accounting from Temple. Started working for Campbell's Soup Company, and Campbell's had a tuition reimbursement program when I was there. It's like all you had to do was pass the class and they would reimburse you 100%. So I ended up getting my MBA while I was working at Campbell's Soup. Worked at Campbell's for 5 years in a number of different roles. Left Campbell's Soup, went to work for Philadelphia Newspapers, which was the company that published the 2 daily papers in Philadelphia at the time, as the assistant controller there. Did that for a couple years, and then worked for Kraft Foods for a few years. And then I ended up moving out to Portland to work for a company called Janssen. They make swimwear, sportswear. And while I was at Janssen, eventually I started at Janssen as the controller, and after a couple years I was the president of Janssen. And one of the ideas we came up with was connecting with Nike to make competition swimwear. And so I ended up putting a deal together, a presentation together, went over and presented to Nike, and they liked what they heard, and we ended up doing a deal with them. And that kind of led to me going to work for Nike. But the thing is, for 40 years, I hid from my background. No one knew. People I worked with every day, people I was close with, they had no clue about my background, because when I was about to graduate from Temple with an accounting degree, it was what was called the Big 8 accounting firms at the time. And if you were an accounting major, you wanted to work for one of the Big 8. And so the one I had kind of targeted was a company called Arthur Andersen. And I ended up going there, spending a whole day interviewing with a number of people. And the day was going really well. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking all day, like, should I really share my background with these folks? Because all they knew is that I was graduating from Temple with honors, and they were looking at the time for African American people to hire, and so I fit what they were looking for. Go through the whole day, and finally I get to the last person that I'm interviewing with, and he's like the hiring manager. So I decide I'm going to share my story with him, and so as we're sitting down, and I said, hey, there's something that I need to talk to you about that hasn't come out in the interviews up to this point. And I decided to share my story with him. So I start to tell him about my background, how I got to where I was at that point. And as I'm talking to him, I could see his face changing, but not in a good way. And finally I got done, and he said, wow, that's an incredible story. And he said, I'm sure you're going to do well. And he reached in his pocket and pulled out an envelope, and he said, I have this offer letter here that I was all ready to give you, but I can't give it to you now. He said, I can't take the chance on something happening down the line, and so I wish you the best, but I can't hire you. And at that point, I decided that I wasn't going to share that background information. I wasn't going to deny it if it came up. I wasn't going to lie on an application or anything like that, but I wasn't going to volunteer the information. And for 40 years, that's how I lived my career. And I was nervous and anxious every day that somehow it may come out. I had nightmares about going back to jail, and for something I didn't know what it was. And this was a recurring nightmare that happened on a regular basis. I had migraines that sent me to the ER a number of times because, again, I was just nervous and anxious and afraid that something would come out and ruin what I had built up to that point. My oldest daughter, who for years, she was saying to me, Dad, you need to share your story. It can be inspirational and motivational to people to see that someone who comes from your background can accomplish the things that you've accomplished, and it can motivate and inspire people. And for years I was like, absolutely not. I am not sharing this story. I'm not talking to anybody about this. But over time, she convinced me that it was a story that I thought could help and motivate and inspire some people. And then, the thing I think that kind of took it over the top for me is I started to realize how blessed I've been in my life, and how many opportunities and how many things that I've been able to experience and been able to do. And I realized that if I didn't share my story and try to help and pass it forward, as was spoken about earlier today, that I wouldn't be showing appreciation for all the positive things that I've had happen for me. So she convinced me to tell the story. And her and I started to work on it. I told her if we're going to do this, we're going to do it together. And we would get together over the years. It took us probably 10 years to do this. We would get together, mainly because I was dragging it out, but we'd get together and we would talk. She'd ask questions, I'd tell stories, and she would record it, and then she'd go back and transcribe it. And so at the end, we had a document. It wasn't a book, but it was all this information and all these stories. And so we ended up connecting with a ghostwriter, and he helped us to put it together in book form. And the book came out about 1.5 years ago. As we were kind of getting to that point where we knew we were going to do this, I had a list of people that I wanted to share with before they heard it from somewhere else. And at the top of that list were Michael Jordan and Phil Knight. And I ended up reaching out to both of them. This was during COVID, so we ended up with a phone call or a Zoom call, and kind of shared with each one of them. My daughter inspired me to share this story, and then kind of told them, and neither of them knew. And it was amazing because both of their response was pretty much the same. Like, I agree with your daughter, you need to share this, it can help motivate and inspire some people. And they both said, whatever I can do to help, I will. And that I guess that kind of made me realize or believe that I was doing the right thing. I think if either one of them had said, well, maybe you shouldn't do this, then I would have been much more reluctant to do it. But because they were both encouraging and supporting, I felt like it was the right thing to do. The other thing that came out of this that to me was the most important part of this for me is that I got an opportunity to meet with the family of the young man whose life I took. And it was an emotional meeting, an emotional situation. Each one of them, it was his sister, his son, and his daughter. And each one of them spoke about how what happened impacted them. But at the end, each one of them said, "But I forgive you." And at the end, we hugged and there was tears. And to me, that was probably the best thing that could have come out of this for me, because over the years, I've had to try to forgive myself for what happened. I've asked God for forgiveness for what happened, and then to have the family also forgive me, that was kind of full circle for me. And again, the response that I've gotten in sharing my story has been pretty amazing to me. A number of people have reached out and have asked me to come and speak to different folks. And just to me, the reaction, and I've had people who have had no connection whatsoever to the criminal justice system talk about how they were inspired by the fact that, redemption, continuing to move forward. I mean, all the things, first of all, I gotta say, I'm just like sitting on the same stage that Ronnie Lott and Steve Young and John Lynch were sitting on. It's just amazing to me. But to hear some of the things that they talked about and some of the comments that they made and how I could relate exactly to the things that they were talking about. For Ronnie Lott to talk about course change, you know what I mean? Yeah. That to me, that hit home directly to me, because that's what I had to do. And to hear them talk about believing in yourself and believing in your greatness, to me, in order to change my life, I had to first believe that I could. And that's not an easy thing when you come from where I came from, to believe that you can do something different, that you can change your life, that you can become somebody who contributes to their community. And to me, that belief was the first step of believing that I can do this. But the second part was having an opportunity to be able to change my life. And I think, to me, that's one of the really important pieces that I think we need to focus on as a society, as a country, is that because someone makes a mistake or someone has made multiple mistakes like I did, doesn't mean that they can't change their life and they can't then become people who contribute, like I said, to their community. But the opportunities have to be there. If I didn't have the opportunity to get an education while I was incarcerated, if I didn't have the opportunity to be able to set my life on a different course, then I wouldn't be here today. The program that I was involved in when I was incarcerated the last time doesn't exist anymore. So if I was there today, I couldn't have come out and done what I've been able to do, because that program and programs like that were taken away in the mid-90s and mid-late 90s. A lot of those programs went away. Pell Grants, which was what I used to be able to take college classes while I was incarcerated, were eliminated for inmates. They're coming back. I think next year inmates will have access to Pell Grants again. But that's a critical step to say, okay, how can people better themselves if they're not given the opportunity? One of the other things that I'm really pretty proud about is that Harvard Business School, I know this is Stanford, but Harvard Business School actually did a case study on my book and on my journey. And they built a lot of context around the story. But one of the charts that just really blew me away, so the recidivism rate generally is about 77%. So 77% of people who get out are back in jail within a year to 2 years. That's just how the revolving door works. But if someone gets a skill or learns a trade or learns something that is provides meaningful employment, that 77% goes to 30%. And if someone gets a bachelor's degree, 77% goes to 6%. and with a master's degree, it's at 0. So to me, that's a clear-cut sign that says if people are given an opportunity to learn, either get an education, learn a skill, or something that can provide them a living wage and allow them to live a successful life, that people will do it. I heard about a program where it was one of the companies here in Silicon Valley was offering to people who were incarcerated an opportunity to learn coding while they were still incarcerated with the guarantee of a job once they got out. And to me, that's the kind of thing that can change people's lives. That's the kind of thing that can get people to, like I said, go from being folks who take from their communities to people who are able to give back and to give to their communities. And so to me, since my stories come out, one of the things that I've been really talking a lot about, and I'm thrilled to have an opportunity to sit here and talk with you folks about it, but is, how can we reach back and help some of those folks to have an opportunity? Sam mentioned the 27 summers, and to me—
At Angola.
Huh?
At
At
Angola.
Angola.
And Ronnie Lott mentioned San Quentin.
Ronnie Lott mentioned San Quentin. To me, one of the things that I've been sharing with people is that some of the most intelligent, creative, smartest people I've ever met are people I met when I was incarcerated. But they haven't been given the opportunity to utilize that intelligence or creativity in a positive way. They've used it in a negative way, but to me, it's like, how can we now provide opportunities for people to use that intelligence and creativity in a positive way?
So, Larry, obviously when one has this much to say and this much experience, it doesn't require many questions. My question, I know why you wrote, I've read why you wrote the book. It's to talk about the issues that you just mentioned, the talent that could be getting wasted, the opportunities that need to be provided, the redemption that can come. In thinking about your story, I thought about all of that. I really got caught on forgiveness. I got caught on the fact that you somehow, and it must have been with pain, you described some of that pain, some of that physical pain, to keep a secret like that. You're with Derek Jeter, you're with Tyra Banks, you're with Michael Jordan. What was it then like when you were with the family of Edward David White? When you sat down with them and you didn't know, after 40 years, you were trying to forgive yourself. Maybe at times you could. Sounds like a lot of times you couldn't. And you had no idea whether they could, because they didn't meet Tyra Banks, they didn't meet Derek Jeter, they didn't meet Michael Jordan. What was that meeting like?
It was extremely emotional. I went into the meeting, not to your point, not knowing what their reaction was going to be, but—
And you hadn't been in touch with them in those 40 years.
No.
You kept the secret. In fact, your career was a secret to them.
Yeah, they didn't
So you
know.
had kept their secret and the rise in your career, and the fact that you had risen to such heights was unknown to them.
It was, and to start off the meeting, going into the meeting, I didn't know what to expect from them, but I knew what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to do was to express my remorse and sorrow to them and let them know how much I regret what happened. And I didn't know if they were going to accept that or if they were going to, reject that or whatever. But fortunately for me, they did accept it. But it's funny. It's not funny, but the older sister, as we were talking, she said, "Yeah, she said, I forgive you, and it's everything's good." She said, "But if this was 30 years ago, I'd been coming across the table on you." And I understand that. I get where she was coming
This
from.
was his now 84-year-old sister who was saying she's got forgiveness in her heart, but if this was 30 years ago, man, I'd be coming after you.
Exactly. And I understand that. I totally understand that. And I just was really thankful that they were willing to forgive me. And like I said, at the end, we hugged, and it was just an emotional, but a really good emotional situation for me. And like I said, I don't think anything else was more important than that for me coming out of this whole situation.
I want to open this up in a moment to questions. I'm sure that everyone has questions about opportunity and redemption and resilience and forgiveness and all the things that we've heard. This is, I can only assume, master programming by Mark Flynn to have had Ronnie Lott and then Sam Acho talking.
I felt like they were setting me up.
They were setting, this was a setup.
I was like, wow.
But what I want to, I've got two final questions for you. I'm going to save one of them if there's a moment at the very end. But what do you want this audience, these Campbell Summit members who are thinking about what their impact's going to be on the world, what do you want them to understand about legacy? Particularly, we're all not perfect. However, we also have to have a place in our heart to think about forgiving others, and maybe that's part of our legacy. What do you want? What is your legacy, and what would you want people to think about their own legacy?
Well, I think as far as my legacy is concerned, I'm absolutely proud of what I've been able to be a part of as far as the Jordan brand is concerned, as far as the Trailblazers are concerned. I'm really proud of that. But what I'm really proud of is the lives and the impact that I've been able to have on other people's lives, and helping other people to realize their excellence, and helping other people to move forward and accomplish the things that they can accomplish in life, and inspiring and motivating people to do that. With the Jordan brand, like I said, I'm extremely proud of the business, and like I said, but the reality is we also do a lot in the community, and I'm much more proud of that. We started a program probably 7 or 8 years ago where we actually provide scholarships for young people across the country coming from different cities, and every year we add another 30, 40 full-blown free ride to any school they want to go to, whether it's a college or it's a skills training school, whatever. And we're now up to like 800 or 900 people that have gone through that program. And to me, that's life-changing stuff. These are people who had the ability and had the drive and the desire to get a higher education, to learn, but didn't have the financial ability to do it. And we were able to step in and provide that. And so to me, I'm hoping that my legacy is about helping people, about taking a negative situation that I have been involved in and turning it into a positive, and hopefully helping people to realize that because you make a mistake or because you do something wrong doesn't mean you can't change your life. I'm never going to be an advocate that if somebody commits a crime, they shouldn't be punished for that. You should be punished for that. But there should be a limit to that punishment, and there should be the ability to move forward and do something different with your life after you've served whatever that punishment is. And I think that I'm an example of the fact that a person can change their life, that a person can, like I said, become contributors to their community. And I mean, I think I've, over my career, I've done some pretty decent things, and I've done some pretty good things over my career, and I've made some pretty good contributions over the years. And but again, it was because I was given that opportunity to get an education and to change my life that I was able to do it.
Why don't we open it up to questions? We've got mics, and it looks like right there. Why don't we go with the first one?
Hey, Larry. Thanks for the time today and sharing your story. Really look forward to reading your book as well. I was curious, as you were talking, I presume while you're incarcerated, you had a lot of time alone with your thoughts. and you shared some of the negative aspects after you got out and some of the anxiety that you dealt with. I was curious if you had any kind of positive strategies or tactics that you could share with us on kind of dealing with your thoughts based on that experience that you used throughout your career, as you've moved along.
I've always felt like, and I think this was because in spite of the fact that I was a street thug and doing all the things I was doing, I come from a good family, working class people. My mom and dad were both there, and I always had family members who inspired me and told me I could do anything I put my mind to, and that if I focused on it, I could do it. And I inside, I always believed that. Even when I was doing crazy stuff out in the street, I always had that belief that whatever I put my mind to, I could accomplish it. And so once I decided to try to do the right thing and put my mind there, I had this internal belief that I could do it, I could accomplish it. And so along the way, I did have strategies and plans and thoughts about how I was going to move forward. But again, it was really about belief that I could accomplish and do the things that I put my mind to. And I think if that wasn't there, and I think the more we can help young people especially have that belief that, I can accomplish this if I put my mind to it. I can do this if I put my mind to it. I think that made a major difference for me. The fact that I had that instinctive belief that I could accomplish the things that I put my mind to.
You highlighted, Craig Mahoney, I'm from Des Moines, Iowa. You highlighted how important education was after you were incarcerated. Do you think there's a role in primary education, grade school, junior high, in trying to change pathways for kids that had your background? And if you think there's a change we could make collectively in what we do and how we do school, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think a lot of what happens in the communities that I come from is that people, especially young people, they don't see a pathway for how they can have a successful life. Because they don't see it around them, they don't see it reflected in what they see every day. And I think that, to me, is, if we can figure out a way, starting from lower levels of school, starting from the times these young people are, going to school, instilling in them the fact that, whatever you want to do, you can do it. And not only instilling it in them, but then providing the resources and the opportunity for them to be able to do that. I don't think in the neighborhoods, when I was growing up, I was all through elementary school, I was a straight A student. I was like the teacher's pet, the smartest kid in the classroom. But somewhere along the line, pleasing teachers and parents became less important to me than pleasing people in the street. And to me, that's where we got to figure out how to stop that shift from happening. Because, like I said, I was that straight A kid, that kid that was, everybody thought was going to be successful. But the lure of the street kind of pulled me in, and like I said, it became more important for me to, have this reputation and impress people in the street than teachers and parents. And somehow, if we can figure out how to stop that shift from happening, and how to keep kids like me, who was, straight A, student who was trying to please my teachers, to keep that from happening. And I think part of it is, these kids don't see people that look like them and come from their neighborhoods that they can aspire to be. And that was one of the other reasons that I decided to share my story, because I want young people who come from neighborhoods like I come from to see that someone from their neighborhood, someone who looks like them, someone who understands what they have gone through, has been able to be successful, and that they can point to me and say, well, hey, if he can do it, then maybe I can do it as well. And so that was one of the motivating factors for me in sharing this story.
Larry, is that what was missing for you? I mean, you said you had a strong family, both parents, it sounds like, were in your life. They were working. You were a good student. The question was about education. So education was there. Family life was there. And yet somehow you had the allure and you ended up on that night at, what was it here?
53rd and
53rd and Locust Street.
Yeah.
Place I bet you wish you never ended up at. Is
Yes.
that, so for any of us looking for actionable steps, we're all getting inspired by these conversations here today. We're all thinking about, okay, what are the ways that I can make a difference tomorrow? Is that a takeaway from you? Is it go be there, go be present?
Yeah, absolutely. And I again, to me, one of the things that I'm thrilled about is that sharing my story has given me access to folks like the people in this room, to be able to say, hey, if you have an opportunity to help somebody that's, been through the criminal justice system, I think that statistically 1 in 3 people has had some involvement with the criminal justice system. I'm sure it's bigger in our communities, but the reality is, if you can provide a way for somebody to change their life, a way for somebody to move forward and become, like I said, a contributor to society. If you can provide that, then to me, you're helping to solve a problem. Also, I think, and this is just me thinking this, but I think from a business perspective, companies that tap into that resource of incarcerated people, that resource where there's all this creativity and intelligence, and figure out a way to tap into that, I think they're going to be the winners.
I think that Mark just said we can only take 7 more questions. One more question.
Great. You're good.
Yeah, okay,
Hold on, I
Mike
need a
is coming.
microphone.
Oh.
Right here in the middle?
Oh, okay.
Where
Does
am
someone have a mic? Because I think one's going right over there unless
Okay,
someone has a mic. Sorry about that.
Thanks for sharing your story. That is really inspiring. I think there's a lot of folks that in this room that have made mistakes too, and the story of redemption is really humbling. I guess my question is, if you had the chance to kind of open up and tell your story earlier, would you have? Or do you feel like that was the perfect timing and kind of shouldering that burden was part of your path?
I actually think that the timing worked out the way it was supposed to. I think, again, I was nervous, afraid to share, but also I think I'm at a point now in my career where I felt much more comfortable being able to share it at this point. And just, I found this out after the book came out, right? But when I was going to work for the Trailblazers, Paul Allen also owned the Seahawks. So they hire you, they do a background check. Well, he had the Seahawks actually security do the background check, and they actually went down to Philadelphia City Hall and found some old records that were there that showed my criminal convictions, my felony convictions. And they came back to the guy who was the hiring manager. There's a guy named Todd Lewicki. Todd was the guy that was going to hire me, and Todd was absolutely convinced that I was the right guy for this job. So when they came back and told Todd what they found, he was nervous about sharing this now with Paul Allen, because he's like, well, Paul may not want to hire this guy after he hears this, and I think he's the right guy. So Todd actually reached out to David Stern, who was the commissioner of the NBA at the time, and asked David if he had to share the information with Paul. And David told him, absolutely, you have to share the information with Paul. And so Todd said he called Paul, and he's kind of sharing this all with Paul and telling him what they found. And Paul says, hey, I got one question. He said, what's that? He said, how long ago was this? He said, like 30 years. He said, don't worry about it then. So they hired me even though they knew. And all the time I'm nervous and worried, but no one ever said anything to me about it. I never knew that they knew. David Stern never said a word to me about it. Paul Allen never said a word to me about it. But what that showed me was that they hired me based on the merits of who I am today, not who I was at that point. And I think that's what we need to focus on when we're looking at people who have this type of situation in their background. Who are they today versus who they were back then?
I want to tell you one other brief story. My wife, Diane, sent me a podcast from the Harvard Business Review about 3 weeks ago, and it was Larry's story. You know, it's this 15-minute podcast, and if anyone's interested, I'll distribute it to you. And so I listened to it, and I said, wow, I wonder if there's any way we could get Larry to come and speak to the summit. So I wrote this email, and I just picked Larry Miller at Nike.com. I had no contact information. 2 minutes after I sent the email, my phone rings. It's Larry Miller, and he said, I'm going to be there.